Alrighty, sorry about the delay there. Welcome back to Free Read Fridays. I'm your intrepid narrator, Fragath, and today there's some devil seed inside my head trying to push its way out of my eyeballs. So if I seem a little under-energized, it's because there's a weather front moving through, and my sinuses are reacting. Setting that aside, welcome back. Yeah, so we're reading more Quarantine by Greg Egan. Let me find where my arbitrary endpoint was going to be. I want to say it was in 2 chapters. We are rapidly approaching the climactic finale of this puppy, which is great. I dig the novel. Yeah, there we go. And that'll give me, yes, that'll be good, because that way I do the book's proper epilogue and then the descriptor essay explanation that Greg Egan did on his website. Very good. I can work with this. So it is now, as I indicated in the description. Oh, that's hot. It is now Heist O'Clock. Do you know where your quantum probabilities are? So, to do my best to recap, because a lot went down last time. Gosh golly gee willikers, did a lot go down. Okay, so actually we might as well do like a bit of a general recap of the book so far, honestly, because things have gotten wild. So back like 30 years ago in the past, um, our solar system got embubulated. Something shut out all the stars. It's a surface that nothing can pass through, including physical objects, energy, light, nothing. Nothing gets through it. Humanity goes a little crazy and then gets over itself. This includes having, some cultists show up and are like, "Oh, it's time. The end of the world is here. We should feel, we should go crazy now." Who call themselves the Children. Probably not much more on them later. Our protagonist is a private eye named Nick Stavrianos. This is in the distant future of 2060 something. And he gets a case to find a woman who basically has no brain, or is at least clinically and medically retarded, um, who has disappeared from the nursing home, for lack of a better term, where she's been at, the hospital that she's been at. In so doing, he goes to New Hong Kong, which is somewhere, I think, on the northern coast of Australia, and investigates a company called BDI. He gets caught doing this. He does find her too, because she's been smuggled to this location. Um, because it turns out she's able to like ignore locked doors, or at least get through locked doors that she should have no right to be able to do, but has been able to. I'm mangling this recap, but you're just gonna have to live with it. So he gets kidnapped, captured, caught by BDI, who then put a loyalty mod in him that makes him loyal to something called the Ensemble, uh, with a capital T and a capital E. And the Ensemble is this larger organization that is researching things, very interesting things. Laura, the person that's been kidnapped, Laura something. I know her first name's Laura. I remember that much. Um, Laura and or people like her, events that might be tied to her. So this loyalty mod makes it so that the ensemble, is now the most important thing in his life, and he loves it. It's the best thing ever, and there's no point questioning this loyalty. It is what it is. It is pure. So he gets sent to another company who also is doing work for the Ensemble to be a security guard, and he's guarding someone who's part of a number of experiments, whose name is Pokwai, and this involves using a device that's in her head that enables her to affect probability, or so it seems. In this case, specifically changing the way atoms of silver move. Now, it turns out that there are other people who've been loyalty modded to be loyal to the Ensemble, and they wind up inculcating, is that the right word? Inculcating our protagonist. And they call themselves the Canon, Canon, because they are the only people who can truly be trusted to do what the Ensemble needs to do. For obvious reasons, they're utterly loyal and can be nothing but loyal to the Ensemble. So they want to get rid of the sham Ensemble, which is basically its current leadership, which, okay. And to do that, they need to steal a dingus. I don't remember exactly what the dingus was. I need to look that up. Give me a moment to see if I can find the dingus that they're looking for. It's data of some kind, presumably. It's data related to um, what they've been researching with Laura, and how it turns out she's been like probably folding quantum possibilities uh, in order to get through doors and stuff. If you're losing track, it's because I'm losing track. So he's going to steal it, and he's going to steal it basically by using a newly installed device in his head that's going to let him take advantage of the device that's in Po Kwai's head in order to smear himself across quantum possibilities and then get this thing and come back. Because of course he has to. It's just the way it is. Um, it's just what he has to do. Okay. Um, and we're kind of dealing with some of the. Right now, he's in sort of the prep stage. Things are starting to work. He just was able to use a random number generator and make the random number generator do, have skewed results. So he's just done that. In fact, I'm going to read like the last page or so. Okay, it's going to be like 2 pages. No, I'm not reading all that. Sorry. I tick the on switch. On the table beside me, the dice generator sends the images of the cubes spinning into the air. They look almost solid, even glinting convincingly as they pretend to catch the ambient light. And they fall to the surface with a faint simulated click. Snake's eyes, 2 ones. My target. I twitchily suppress the by now instinctive third step of the routine, and, leaving the Hypernova menu untouched, enter this first result into the analysis program, thinking, each time I do this, von Neumann will smear into multiple versions, with copies of the program which have been fed every possible combination of results so far. I don't have to think about individual throws. All I have to do is choose an eigenstate in which the analysis program eventually declares success. Surely I can manage a task as simple as that, with the help of the true Ensemble, which is bolded and is the name of the. Um, it is his personal view of what the Ensemble is. Anything in service to the Ensemble is the Ensemble being this these experiments involving converging eigenstates. Snake's eyes for a second time. and a third. What if I collapsed right now before the program gives a verdict? What will this have been? A fluke? A coincidence? A rare, but insignificant, run of good luck? Or am I already witnessing the proof that I will remain smeared beyond that point? Snake's eyes for a fourth time. At one chance in 36 each toss, the probability of a run of 4 or more, just once in all the 30,000 tosses, the 10 nights worth of data that I have so far, is already down to 1.7%. A fifth time, at 0.048%. Having crossed its arbitrary 1% threshold, the program starts flashing messages of triumph. 6, at 0.0013%. 7, at 0.000037%. 8, at 0.000010%. I stop feeding data into the program and just stare at the dice, landing the same way again and again like some cheap looping advertising hologram. Maybe the generator has malfunctioned, that's all. Malfunctioned how, though? And why? Do I think I've willed a change of circuitry that biases the thing? Am I going to crawl back to some cozy idea of telekinesis by method unknown? I'm not even trying to influence the device. I'm just watching everything happen. Po Kwai was right. The smeared self does all the work. I'm going to have to swallow the whole truth. I'm living through a pattern of events that will be, or has been, plucked from a few quadrillion possibilities by the collective effort of a few quadrillion versions of me, most of whom I am about to slaughter, unless I already have. I tick the off switch. The dice keep falling. A 3 and a 4. A 2 and a 1. A pair of 6s. I wipe the sweat off my face, shaken, elated, giddy with success and fear. I reach down and grip the seat of the chair. The cool, smooth metal is as solid as ever. It doesn't take long to calm myself. I've come through unharmed, unchanged, haven't I? And I have less to fear than ever. There'll be no more mod failures, no more hallucinations. I'm in control now. And whatever bizarre metaphysical convolutions I'm going to have to come to terms with, one simple truth remains. In the end, when I pull the plug, hit the off switch, collapse the wave, it still all adds up to normality. Oh hey, optical antenna. All right, so that's our recap of like the last page of our previous entry, and now we're gonna get started on, actually reading the book. Making headway. Okay. Chapter 10. In the spirit of the Canon, Louis sets the agenda for my conquest of the mod without ever suggesting that my own instincts on the matter could be anything but flawless. With his prompting, I move on to more elaborate dice tricks, cycles of 2, 3, or 4 different outcomes, totals that are always prime numbers, dice that always agree. The objective odds against these conditions being met by pure chance are no more spectacular than those of my first success, and in some cases are far less stringent. But nevertheless, identifying and amplifying the eigenstates for these complex patterns seems like it ought to be more of a challenge. Then again, perhaps the criterion in all cases is simply my belief that the outcome is correct. The state is chosen only because it contains a version of me who thinks he's been successful. And if one of my virtual selves were to suffer a lapse of concentration, and mistakenly believe that a 5 and a 3 had summed up to a prime, he might end up being rewarded for his incompetence with the privilege of becoming real. Maybe that's already happened. Several times. Maybe I'm slowly but steadily mutating toward an increased capacity for inattentiveness and self-delusion. If this kind of evolution could give Laura the brain pathways upon which Ensemble itself is based, I shouldn't underestimate the effects it might have on me. I could buy a pocket HV camera and start recording everything, replaying it only after collapsing, but I'm reluctant to smuggle in too much incriminating hardware. If I'm caught simply throwing the dice, that could be passed off as an innocent enough amusement. I could claim that P3 was malfunctioning again, requiring some diversion to keep me sane through the early hours of the morning. I doubt that this explanation would stretch to making home movies on duty. As the experiment proceeds, my resolve often wavers, but it never quite fails. This is what the true ensemble requires of me, I'm certain of that. And if smearing is the antithesis of everything I stand for, everything I've spent my life trying to achieve, control over who I am and who I can become, then surely the perfect control that ensemble grants me more than compensates for the risks, so long as it's me who's in control, however indirectly. So long as my wishes continue to hold sway when I smear. At times, I still catch myself thinking, if I don't know how to invoke ensemble, who does? Which of my short-lived virtual accomplices learns the trick? And, having done so, why does he let himself die in the collapse? Why does he strengthen an eigenstate other than his own, when he could use the mod to make himself real? But the more I think about it, the more convinced I am that Po Kwai's view must be correct. My entire smeared self operates ensemble, and there is no single version of me who possesses the skill. Whoever the collapse made real would mimic my protestations of ignorance. The knowledge must be distributed, like the knowledge in a neural net. No single neuron in my brain embodies any of my skills, so why should I expect any version of me to hold the secrets of my smeared self? And whether the smeared Nick Stavrianos rediscovers the new skill, whoops, rediscovers the skill anew, whoops. And whether the smeared Nick Stavrianos rediscovers the skill anew each time he comes into being, or whether the knowledge survives the collapse, encoded in some hologram in my brain, there are no virtual martyrs, no self-sacrificing alter egos who use the mod to give me what I want, at the cost of their own existence. And my smeared self? He's no martyr. He has no choice. One way or another, he must always end up collapsed. Which is not to assume that he must always end up collapsed as me. Just when the whole business is beginning to seem almost mundane, I want totals of 7, I get totals of 7. What could be simpler than that? Liu hands me a wad of sealed envelopes.
These are lists of 100 random outcomes. You might try making the dice produce them.
You mean read through the list as the dice are thrown? He shakes his head.
What would be the point of that? Consult the list after collecting the data, but before you collapse, of course.
I balk at this, instinctively, and fail 4 nights running. And the truth is, I'm glad to fail. Defiantly, blasphemously, self-righteously fucking joyful. As if my failure implied some kind of reprieve for all the discredited, reasonable explanations that I thought I'd stopped clinging to long ago. How could I make the outcomes match when I don't even know what they are? Of course I'm failing. It's just not possible. At the same time, I know full well this task is nothing special, nothing new. It no more requires clairvoyance than the other experiments required telekinesis. It's just a matter of choosing the right eigenstate, of making the right present become the past. On the 5th night, as before, I note the results in a Mind Tools scratch pad, then pull an envelope from my pocket at random and tear it open. After the first 3 matches, I'm sure that the other 97 will agree, but I diligently check them one by one. I don't feel the least bit disoriented, or resentful, until after I've ticked the off switch and collapsed. But then, given the choice, why would I?
So he's getting lists of dice throw numbers to work uh, before even looking at the list to know what he wants to happen. So probability is getting a tad skewed, just a smidgen. Louis gives me a combination padlock and suggests casually, "Why not open this on the first try?" By throwing dice? No, on your own. Using von Neumann? No, by guessing. I sit in the anteroom, waiting for Po Kwai to fall asleep. I wonder what she dreams about when I borrow the mod. Nothing at all, if my smeared self chooses her state correctly. But without waking her and asking her, before collapsing, on what basis does he make that choice? Maybe versions of me do wake her and ask her. I deprime, smear, then wait 5 minutes. I want to be sure that I'll end up sufficiently smeared to operate Ensemble. And it's far less off-putting to go through all the waiting now. Whoa. And it's far less off-putting to go through all the waiting now before even attempting the task than to leave it until after I've than to leave it until I've succeeded. And I find myself confronting the fact that I have no choice. I can't, I won't collapse too soon. The whole question of the timing of the collapse still unsettles me. Po Kwai has it easy. She's given no choice. In my case, there must be eigenstates in which I choose to collapse earlier or later than I do in the state that's finally made real. These attempts are inconsequential, of course. The collapse is only real if it makes itself real. That sounds uncomfortably circular, but at least it's consistent. The entire wave collapses precisely when the chosen state includes the action which brings that about. Or rather, it's consistent from the point of view of the version who becomes real. But what about the versions who attempt to collapse and fail? Do they know that they've failed? And what that means? Or are they just mathematical abstractions who know nothing, feel nothing, experience nothing? I take the padlock from my pocket and stare at it with increasing unease. People are notoriously bad at inventing truly random numbers. I wish I'd decided, before smearing, to ignore Louis and use the device. And use the dice. What if the combination is 99999999999, or 0 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9? I have no doubt that it's physically possible for me to hit the keys in any order whatsoever. But am I psychologically capable of guessing such a non-random sequence? Well, I'd better be, because if I'm not, I'm sure my smeared self, with the help of Ensemble, can find someone else who is. I laugh that off. Change equals suicide? That's Po Kwai's line, not mine. Besides, surely it's too late for such qualms. If nothing's real until the collapse, then surely I've already collapsed. This whole experience has already been selected, and I've already become whoever I have to become in order to open the lock, and it doesn't feel like much of a change to me. But as I move my index finger toward the keypad, I suffer a sudden shift of perspective. I'm one of at least 10 billion people sitting in at least 10 billion rooms, confronting at least 10 billion locks. If I guess the correct combination, I live. If not, I die. It's as simple as that. What makes me think that I have already succeeded? The fact that the room looks normal? The fact that I'm experiencing anything at all? If the collapse doesn't manufacture experience, if it merely selects it, then why should the perceptions of any one version of me be radically different from the others? Why should the state that happens to become real be the only one that seems real? I start to put the. I, if this isn't making your brain itch a little, then guess what? You have no feeling in your brain. Well, wait, no, that's true. You don't have. Never mind. Don't mind me. I stare at the. Whoops. I start to put the lock down. Nobody's forcing me to go through with this. But then I think, that's the very worst thing I can do. My smeared self is going to choose someone who opens the lock, not someone who abandons the whole experiment. If I give up, my chances of surviving are zero. I stare at the clock and try to psych myself out of these absurd fears. I've smeared before and come through. Yes, of course I have, or I wouldn't be here at all. That says nothing about my situation now. I shake my head. This is ludicrous. Everybody smears, however briefly. Everybody collapses. What do I think? Everyday life is founded on a process of constant genocide? If I couldn't swallow that for hypothetical aliens, why should I swallow it for human beings? Hypothetical aliens? Who do I think made the bubble? So, what am I going to do? Sit here and wait for Lee to turn up and take the decision out of my hands? Or do I plan to find a way to spend the rest of my life unobserved? But even that wouldn't save me. When the chosen version of me chooses to collapse, I'll vanish. Unless I am the chosen version. And the odds against that are worse than 10 billion to 1. I don't know what part I don't know what breaks the spell, but suddenly, mercifully, I'm skeptical again. Part of me muses, if quadrillions of virtual humans really are dying every second, then death is nothing to fear. It's a purely intellectual observation, though. I don't believe I'm going to die. I raise the lock and hit 10 keys without thinking, almost without looking. Then I stare at the tiny display above the keypad. 14500454009. Too orderly? Too random? Too late. I tug the ring. Louis stands by the central pond in Kowloon Park, throwing bread to the ducks. I think he's seen too many bad spy movies. He doesn't even glance my way when I'm standing right beside him. I say, there's not much point pretending you don't know me. I think our employer might already be aware of the fact. He ignores that.
What happened last night?
Success.
On the first try?
Yes, on the first try. I glance down at the pond and try to decide if I want to kill him or embrace him. After a moment, I say, it was a good idea, the padlock. It was torture, for 5 minutes, but I have to admit that in the end it was worth it. I laugh, or I try to. It doesn't sound at all convincing. I tell you, when that fucking thing sprang open, I'd never been so happy in my life. I almost died from sheer relief. And there's no logic to this, I know, but nothing could have made me more confident than whatever happens now, I will come through. He nods solemnly.
Operating the mod isn't the challenge. The challenge is learning how to think about it. You have to find a frame of mind which lets you pass through these situations, untroubled. We can't have you succumbing to metaphysical terror in the middle of your raid on BDI.
No. I laugh again, more successfully this time. Mind you, I don't think I'll find many locks in BDI with such easy combinations. 10 nines in real life? Hardly. Louis shakes his head.
Easy combinations? What does that mean? For you, they're all easy now.
It takes me another week to master locks that ought to need keys. Louis shows me his calculations. The odds against a few quantum dot transistors in a lock's microchip spontaneously obliging me with all the right malfunctions are no worse than the odds against 100 consecutive snake's eyes. The fact that neither event would normally be expected to occur in the entire history of the universe, if such a timescale can be so glibly invoked, when it's likely that nothing at all occurred in the human sense for most of that history, is beside the point. The point is, I've convinced myself that it can be done, and the smeared Nick Stavrianos seems to find that helpful. Security cameras still worry me, though. If I'm observed, I'm collapsed. Collapsed at random by whoever's watching the monitor. Louis says,
Not at random. You still have control of the eigenstate mod, and not collapsed. Not if you make the probability small enough. You don't collapse yourself when you don't want to, do you? Even though that's certainly a possible event. Stop thinking of your smeared self as this fragile, defenseless, precarious system which can't survive a single glance.
But one glance will destroy.
No, can, not will. One glance can collapse you, certainly, and dice can fall in all kinds of ways. But they don't if you don't let them. Observation, in itself, doesn't collapse the wave. You don't become blind when you smear, do you? The collapse is a distinct process. If someone observes you, the two wave functions interact. They become a single entity. That gives the observer the power to collapse you, but it also gives you the power to manipulate the observer and prevent the collapse.
So we battle for the fate of the wave function? Just when I've stopped worrying about struggling against all my own hypothetical selves, I have to face a tug of war for reality with someone who's bleh, blah.
Let's try that again.
So we battle for the fate of the wave function? Just when I've stopped worrying about the struggling against all my own hypothetical selves, I have to face a tug of war for reality with someone who's indisputably as real as I am.
Think of it that way if you like, but it won't be much of a competition. Your opponents won't even know what the wave function is, let alone have any capacity to
Hmm. Why am I having a hard time? It's multisyllabic words. Me grug. Me grug use monosyllabic words. Grug's strong. Let's try a drink of water.
Think of it that way if you like, but it won't be much of a competition. Your opponents won't even know what the wave function is, let alone have any capacity to manipulate it.
That hasn't stopped several billion people from collapsing it a few thousand times a day.
Collapsing themselves and inanimate objects and other equally ignorant, equally powerless people. They've never faced anything like you.
People have faced Laura Andrews. Louis smiles.
Exactly. And yet she still managed to break out of the Hilgeman twice, didn't she? What more proof do you need?
The first night that I abandon my post, I remain on the level of Po Kwai's apartment and confine myself to rooms and corridors that are, plausibly, deserted. I wander through the fields of a dozen cameras and motion detectors. My colleagues in the central security room should, at the very least, demand an immediate explanation, but no coded infrared message blasts down from the ceiling transceivers. Proving what? That I've caused the cameras and sensors to malfunction discreetly? That I've made the guards inattentive? Or that I've merely kept any sign that I've been observed from reaching me? That I've fended off the consequences until after the collapse? I walk past the silent apartments of the other volunteers, wondering, jealously, if any of these people have begun to master Ensemble. Louis thinks not, but he can't be certain. I can live with my need for Po Kwai's unconscious intercession, but the thought of anyone else gaining access to the mysteries of the true Ensemble fills me with disgust. Nobody in the world shares the insight that the loyalty mod has granted me. Only I have the right to travel this path. I hold this belief side by side with the knowledge that my ultimate aim is to deliver Ensemble to the Canon, but the contradiction seems superficial and an irrelevant abstraction. Blech. I return to the anteroom, collapse, and wait to see if I've achieved invisibility, or mere ostrich-like self-deception. Could my smeared self tell the difference between states where I truly went unnoticed and states where I fooled nobody but myself? Which is the least probable? To walk past to walk past a camera unseen, or to distort my own memories and perceptions to convince myself that I've done so? I don't know, but nobody arrives to accuse me of dereliction of duty. The hours pass as uneventfully as ever. Then again, maybe I'm already huddled, catatonic, in a corner of some basement prison cell, and tonight's apparent success is the product of nothing but my smeared self's selection of a version of me with extraordinary hallucinatory skills. How can I rule that out? The fact that it's unlikely no longer means anything at all. If I can succeed against spectacular odds, I can fail in the very same way. Li Hing Chung takes over. Bleh. Li Hing Chung takes over. I sit in the train home. I sit in the train home. I just had a wonderful vision of just people living in a train. Um, as you know, you can do, I guess. It's a train home. It's a home for trains. What do they call those? They had them on Thomas the Tank Engine. God, that's dating yourself, Fred. Good work. Jeez Louise. I'd probably call them silos or hangars, but I don't know what their actual name is. I sit in the train home. I can't. I can't. Li Hing Chung takes over. I sit in the train home, staring at the other passengers, daring this contrived vision to decay into surreal anarchy. But the carriage remains solid. The people stare back at me coolly. The stations appear through the windows in just the right order, at just the right times. It's hard to believe that there's room for so much clockwork in my head. By the time I'm home, every hint of doubt has evaporated. I'm not hallucinating anything, or at least no more than usual. As I lie in bed listening to the familiar street sounds, the mundanity of the world enfolds me, more comforting and more strange than ever before. I stare up at the ceiling, and every crack in the plaster, every patch of sunlight, seems patient beyond comprehension, a miracle of endurance defying belief. I could keep watch for 1 billion years, waiting for some sign of the underlying truth to reveal itself, and still be spared. How can I call this feat an illusion? A lie? The light dims, and there's a sudden burst of rain against the window. And for a moment I wonder, which did we really create? The unique, solid, macroscopic world of experience? Or the multi-valued, smeared quantum world that seems to underpin it? Po Kwai believes that our ancestors collapsed the universe. But if the reverse were true, if the 20th century creators of quantum mechanics didn't so much discover the laws of the microscopic world as bring them into being, would we even know the difference? Is it any harder to believe that the human brain might have manufactured the quantum world from the classical than it is to believe the opposite? And with all our, inescapably, anthropocentric experiments, can we ever hope to discover the objective, inhuman truth? Maybe not, but I still know which trait seems most human to me. A crowd of children on their way to school, caught in the rain on the street below, start squealing. I choose sleep. I arm myself with a dozen excuses before setting out to challenge ASR's security by leaving the 30th floor. There's no need for explanations, though. The two guards at the security station avert their eyes as I pass, a perfectly choreographed moment that leaves me wanting to laugh with delight, or sink gibbering to the floor as at this final proof of oh my gosh. The two guards at the security station avert their eyes as I pass, a perfectly choreographed moment that leaves me wanting to laugh with delight, or sink gibbering to the floor at this final proof of my complete derangement. Instead, I close my eyes for a moment and tell myself, unconvincingly, that it's no stranger than 100 consecutive snake's eyes. I decide to take the stairs rather than the elevator. Both are monitored, but it strikes me that the elevator might link me with anyone whose passage through the building is affected in some way by my use of it. I decide to take the stairs? Maybe I have no choice in the matter. Maybe every last detail of my thoughts and actions has been, or will be, selected by my smeared self. But the illusion of free will remains as compelling as ever, and I can't, Literally can't? Literally italicized can't. Can't is italicized. Literally can't? Question mark? There is a question mark there. But the illusion of free will remains as compelling as ever, and I can't, literally can't, help thinking that the choice was mine. Yes, okay, I think I got it right. That time. You need to actually know how the English language works to read some of these books, I'm telling you. I'm telling you, it's crazy having to read a book where you have to know how to read. That sounds either really elitist, really dumb, or something silly in the middle, but it's true. Not all books are made for all reading levels, and this one is more challenging than most stuff one normally reads. Where was I? I descend to the 6th floor, which is meant to be completely sealed off at this hour, but the door from the stairway behaves precisely as if it were unlocked. The security station is unmanned, and heavy steel shutters block the way. They begin to glide apart before I even glance at the control box, which ought to require 2 magnetic keys and central authorization. I step through, giddy for a moment with a mixture of megalomania and paranoia. I really don't know whether to feel empowered or manipulated. I'm not doing any of this, and yet there's no doubt that it's exactly what I want. From the very first dice trick, my smeared self has done my bidding. Clearly, all my fears of mutiny were unfounded. Those early mod failures, those visions of Karen, must have been nothing but an aberration. And that's hardly surprising. I had no conscious idea what I was doing, so no wonder I had no control. Every lab, every storeroom is open to me. I wander from room to room at random, heedless of locks and cameras. At first, fighting a growing sense of unreality, but then willingly succumbing to it. I don't believe for a moment that I'm literally dreaming, but it's easier to let this dreamlike mood overtake me than to keep up the battle between ingrained common sense and the elaborate intellectual reasons why all of these bizarre miracles are permitted in the waking world. Louis was right. The challenge, for me, isn't operating the mod, but finding ways to stay sane while it happens. And it is a lot like dreaming. Doors open because they should open. I remain undetected because the logic of the dream demands it. And like any dream protagonist, I can't expect free will. I don't presume to be in control. In room 619 I hesitate, and idly wish for the chair beside the main console to levitate, or slide across the floor toward me. But I'm not at all surprised when it does neither. Not because I doubt that it's possible, just because it wouldn't be right. I know, in the manner of dreams, when it's time to leave the 6th floor and trudge back up the 24 flights of stairs. The exertion this requires is scrupulously realistic, and my numbness gradually clears, enough to let me grow anxious again. All those doors, all those locks, all that surveillance hardware. Multiplying out the probabilities makes the whole exercise seem dangerously fragile and precarious. I balk at the exit to the 30th floor, afraid that these doubts might rebound on me, that I might be punished for my lack of faith. I wait for my breathing to grow quieter, knowing how absurd that is, but pandering to my obsolete instincts for the sake of peace of mind. Finally, I steel myself and open the door. One more casual miracle to prove that all is well, or one more improbability piled upon a tottering edifice, and step through. The guards contrive not to see me as efficiently as before, and I think I have problems with free will. Oh no. I walk through the checkpoint with my eyes straight ahead and turn the corner without looking back. The moment I'm out of their potential sight, I very nearly collapse, desperate to set the night's events in concrete, to make my impossible luck indisputably, irreversibly real. But as the hypernova menu pops into my mind's eye, I recall that I'm still in the field of view of at least 2 cameras. As a gesture to normality, I open the door to the anteroom in the ordinary way, with a coded RedNet pulse, a thumbprint, and a magnetic key. Then I wonder, Too late. If this authorized event is more likely to be logged in the building's security computer than all the illicit entries that I know went unnoticed. I slammed the door behind me, muttering, I'm getting sloppy. I've got to take more care. Po Kwai laughs. I wouldn't say that, but I was surprised when I found you weren't there. When I found you weren't here. She frowns. What's wrong? I shake my head. Nothing. I thought I heard an intruder. It was a false alarm, though. There's nothing to worry about. An intruder? Where? Out in the corridor. But aren't there cameras? How could anyone? I shrug. Hardware can be undermined. In theory. But forget it. There was nobody there. You look like you raced this nobody to the roof and back. I realize I'm visibly sweating, and it's not from climbing the stairs. I wipe my forehead apologetically. I did check the staircase, a few levels up and down. I must be getting out of condition. I'm surprised your mods actually allow you to perspire. I laugh weakly. It'd be very dangerous not to. Appetite suppression is one thing, but screwing up thermoregulation would be suicidal. She nods and says nothing. She seems more baffled than suspicious. If she doubts my story, I expect she thinks that I've played down the incident, not invented it. I try to think of a way to keep her from innocently asking Li Hing Chung about last night's excitement, but nothing comes to mind. Don't tell anyone about this, because... What? Because I don't want to seem like an idiot chasing phantoms? She knows that the guards at the checkpoint must have seen me. More importantly, how long has she been awake? Since before I walked through the checkpoint, surely. It can't have taken more... It could...
My mouth parts are rebelling. I'll not have it. My smeared self will do it right.
More importantly, how long has she been awake? Since before I walked through the...
Remember, you're choosing this outcome. Damn it.
Wait, no, I don't have the mods. Shoot. More importantly, how long has she been awake? Since before I walked through the checkpoint, surely. It can't have taken me more than 20 seconds to get from the stairway to this room. So how did I get past the guards? Has she collapsed herself, collapsed me, broken my link to Ensemble? Or are we both still smeared? And if we are, what happens if I shut off the collapse inhibiting mod now? Is the past I remember already irrevocable? Or if I collapse now, do I risk some other sequence of events, chosen at random, or chosen by Po Kwai's smeared self, taking its place? I have to stay smeared until she's asleep again, or predominantly asleep. I have to be certain that the choice of eigenstate is mine. I move into the anteroom. All I have to do is stay calm, make small talk, wait for her to grow tired. What woke you? She shrugs. I don't know. Then she changes her mind and says sheepishly, Another stupid dream. What about? If you don't mind me. Nothing very exciting. Wandering around on the 6th floor, sneaking from lab to lab like some kind of burglar. But I didn't steal anything. I just wanted to prove that I could go wherever I pleased. She laughs, no doubt acting out my resentment over the way I've been shut out of the scientific side of the work here. I'm afraid my dreams are usually like that, pretty transparent. So what happened to wake you? She frowns. I'm not sure. I was coming up the stairs and, I don't know, I was afraid of something. Afraid of being caught out. I was headed back here, and for some reason I was terrified that someone would see me. She pauses, then adds, deadpan, Maybe that's what you heard in the corridor. Me on my way back. I know she's joking, but my skin crawls. Who's choosing this conversation? My smeared self? Her smeared self? The joint wave function of the two of us? Yeah? So you've been quantum tunneling through walls again? And floors? Why bother taking the stairs? Why not just move from A to B? Well, in dreams, who knows? I expect my subconscious lacks the imagination to face the whole truth about quantum physics, and the courage. Courage? She shrugs. Maybe that's not the right word. Courage? Honesty?
I don't know what's needed, but lately I've been thinking a lot about the part of me that's lost when I collapse. And it's stupid, I know, but when I try to accept the fact that there are women almost exactly like me who exist for a second or two, experience something that I don't, and then vanish. She shakes her head dismissively, almost angrily. Pretty precious, isn't it? Worrying about the death of my virtual alternatives. How many lives do I want?
You tell me.
Just one, personally, but I expect those other selves wouldn't mind one each as well. She shakes her head again, decisively. But it's crazy thinking like that. It's crazy thinking that way. It's like shedding tears over dead skin. It's what we are. It's the way we function. Humans make choices. We murder the people we might have been. If the work I'm doing makes that uncomfortably explicit, it still doesn't change anything. We can't live any other way. And now that the bubble protects the rest of the universe, we just have to come to terms with ourselves.
I recall my own previous skepticism and say belatedly, assuming that all of this is true, there may be nothing to come to terms with. She rolls her eyes.
Listen, don't worry. ASR aren't about to announce to the world at large that the bubble's purpose is to defend the universe against human depletion of alternatives. People went crazy enough about the bubble itself, sans explanations. The truth is so loaded that I'm not even sure which would be more dangerous, people misunderstanding it or people getting it right. Human perceptions have decimated the universe. Life consists of constantly slaughtering versions of ourselves. Imagine what kind of sects would form around ideas like that. Blech. Imagine what kind of sects, SECTS, not the other kind that it's getting mangled to through the recording, kind of sects would form around ideas like that.
And imagine what kind of reaction you'd get from the existing sects, the ones who think they've had all the answers for the last 34 years.
Yeah, the ones I'm supposed to be guarding you against.
Po Kwai nods, then stretches and stifles a yawn. I resist the temptation to suggest that she must be tired.
She says, I don't know how you put up with me. If I'm not boring you with my dreams, or bitching about the way ASR treats me, whoops, or bitching about the way ASR is treating me, I'm spouting all this angst about obliterating alien civilizations and murdering our own alternatives.
Don't apologize for that. I'm interested.
Are you?
She gives me a searching look, then shakes her head in mock frustration.
I can't read you, you know. If you were humoring me, I wouldn't know the difference. I'll just have to take your word for it.
She glances at her wristwatch, an ostentatious, and now dishonest, emblem of a mod-free brain.
It's after 3. I suppose I'd better.
She moves toward the doorway, then hesitates.
I know you physically can't get sick of this job, but what does your family think about you working all night, every night? About working all night, every night.
I don't have a family.
Really? No kids? I imagined you with.
No wife, no kids.
Who then?
What do you mean?
Girlfriends? Boyfriends?
Nobody. Not since my wife died.
She cringes. Oh, Nick, I'm sorry. Shit. My usual brilliant tact. When did it happen? Not since you've been working here? Nobody told me.
No, no. It was almost 7 years ago.
And what? You're still in mourning?
I shake my head. I've never been in mourning.
I don't understand.
I have a mod that defines my responses. I don't grieve for her. I don't miss her. All I can do is remember her. And I don't need anyone else. I can't need anyone else. She hesitates, curiosity no doubt battling some outmoded sense of propriety, before it strikes home that I have no grief to respect.
But how did you feel at the time, before you had this mod installed?
I was a cop then. I was on duty when she died, or near enough. So, I shrug. I didn't feel a thing. For an instant, I'm starkly aware that this confession is as improbable as anything I've done all night. That the smeared Nick and Po Kwai is plucking it from the thinnest realms of possibility with as much fastidiousness as each feat of lockpicking and sentry dodging. But then the moment passes, and the illusion of will, the smooth flow of rationalization, returns. I wasn't hurt by her death, but I knew that I would be. I knew that as soon as I deprimed, shut down my behavioral mod, I'd suffer. Badly. So I did the obvious, sensible thing. I took steps to protect myself. Or rather, my primed self took steps to protect my unprimed self. The zombie Boy Scout came to the rescue. Excuse me. She's doing a pretty good job of hiding her reaction, but it's not hard to imagine. Equal parts pity and revulsion. And your superiors just let you go ahead? Oh, shit, no. I had to resign. The department wanted to throw me to the jackals. Grief therapists, loss counselors, trauma adjustment specialists. I laugh. These things aren't left to chance, you know. There's a departmental protocol several megabytes long, and an army of people to implement it. And to be fair to them, they weren't inflexible. They offered me all kinds of choices. But staying primed until I could physically circumvent the whole problem wasn't one of them. Not because it would have made me a bad cop, but it would have been awfully bad PR. Join the police force, lose your spouse, and rewire your brain so you don't give a fuck. I could have sued to keep my job, I suppose. Legally, I had a right to use any mod I liked so long as it didn't affect my work. But there didn't seem much point in making a fuss. I was happy enough the way things turned out. Happy? Yes, the mod made me happy. Not buzzed, not wired, not euphoric. Just as happy as Karen had made me when she was alive. You don't mean that. Of course I do. It's true. It's not a matter of opinion. That's precisely what it did. It's a matter of neural anatomy. So she was dead and you felt just fine? I know that sounds callous, and of course I wish she'd survived that, but she didn't survive, and there was nothing I could do about that. So I made her death irrelevant. She hesitates, then says, "And you never think that maybe—" What? That it's all some kind of awful travesty? That I'd rather not be this way? That I should have gone through the natural process of grief and emerged with all my natural emotional needs intact? I shake my head. No, the mod is a complete package, a self-contained set of beliefs on every aspect of the matter, including its own appropriateness. The zombie Boy Scout was no fool. You don't leave any loose ends, or the whole thing unravels. I can't believe it's a travesty. I can't regret it. It's exactly what I want, and it always will be. But don't you ever wonder what you'd think, what you'd feel, without the mod? Why should I? Why should I care? How much time do you spend wondering what you'd be like with a totally different brain? This is who I am. In an artificial state? I sigh. So what? Everyone's in an artificial state. Everyone's brain is self-modified. Everyone tries to shape who they are. Are neural mods so terrible simply because they do it so well? Because they actually let people get what they want? Do you honestly think that the brain that bleh, do you honestly think that the brain wiring that comes from natural selection and an accidental life and people's own, largely ineffectual, striving to change themselves naturally, is some kind of touchstone of perfection? Okay, we spent thousands of years inventing ludicrous religious and pseudoscientific reasons as to why all the things we couldn't control just happened to be the best of all possible alternatives. God must have done a perfect job. And if not God, then evolution. Either way, tampering would be sacrilege. And it's going to take a long time for the whole culture to grow out of that bullshit. But face the truth. It's a heap of outdated excuses for not wanting the things we couldn't have. You think it's tragic, and I'm happy with the way I am? Well, at least I know why I'm happy. Whoops. You think it's tragic that I'm... Why? Why? You think it's tragic that I'm happy with the way I'm at? What? Bleh. Mm. You think it's tragic that I'm happy with the way I am? That I'm. You think it's tragic that I'm happy with the way I am? Mm. Got it.
Yes, maybe. Well, at least I know why I'm happy. At least I don't have to kid myself that the end product of a few trillion random events constitutes the indisputable, unimprovable pinnacle of creation. I wait an hour after she's gone, and then collapse. The process, of course, is uneventful. The past, inevitably, is still as I remember it. I'm fully aware that this proves nothing, that it couldn't seem to happen any other way. But the irrational lesson of the padlock is reinforced nonetheless. Fearing that I won't be the one to survive, and then finding out that I have survived, as if that were some kind of miracle and not a tautology, drives home the conviction that there's always only one. I have like dyslexia this morning, afternoon, whatever time it is. I have no idea. My brain hurts. Fearing that I won't be the one to survive, and then finding out that I have survived, as if that were some kind of miracle and not a tautology, drives home the conviction that there's always only one true version of me. It may be a delusion, but it's the kind of delusion that I badly need. I think back over my forced confession with a faint sense of humiliation, but it doesn't last long. So, Po Kwai knows about Karen. That's bolded because it's the name of the program. She disapproves. She pities me. I'll live. One thing worries me, though. What if the smeared Po Kwai takes control again? Out of nothing but curiosity, she changed me enough to make me disclose a secret that I, once, would never have shared with her in a million years. Armed with knowledge, disapproval, and pity, what would she change next? So, if the very thought, if the mere thought of you making yourself accept things as they are and being able to make you genuinely believe it really skeeved you out, what does the thought of somebody else doing it to you do to you? Hmm. So he knows so much about the loyalty mod, partly because it's his job to know, and partly because he's basically done it to himself already. Kind of, sorta, not really, maybe a little. If this makes you have certain questions about the moral implications about such things, well, that's why this book exists, and that's the point. It's spooky. And that's why we read stuff like this. That's why we read books like Blindsight, make us really question everything about ourselves. It's the act of questioning that lets us discover what we want and what we are and who we could be and whatever. Chapter 11. Louis agrees that we have to accelerate our schedule to forestall Pourquoi's growing influence. My relief is mixed with apprehension. The prospect of rushing ahead to the break-in without the gradual progression of rehearsals I'd been expecting leaves me feeling desperately ill-prepared. In theory, the burglary may be little more than a long sequence of the kind of tasks I've already performed, but I still can't fight down an image of each successive feat as one more story piled on top of an impossibly precarious house of cards. The last time I broke into BDI, at least I understood the nature of the risks I faced, even if my knowledge of the details turned out to be incomplete. This time, I'll be relying entirely on my smeared self agreeing to collapse, a process akin to suicide for him, in a suitably advantageous manner. And why should he? Because most of his component selves, in a vote weighted by probability, want him to? It may look like it's worked that way so far, but what do I really know about his motives? Nothing. I become him. He in turn becomes me. But his nature remains opaque to me. I want to believe that he's aware of my aspirations, moved by my concerns. But that may be nothing but wishful thinking. For all I know, he could have more in common with the bubble makers than with any human being on the planet, myself included. I am, of course, free to change my mind. The Canon will do nothing to compel me. But I can't give up. I can't back out.
I know I'm serving the true Ensemble the only way I can. In the only way I can. And although it may be absurd to hope that this blessing guarantees my success, I have to believe that it makes the risk worth taking. In Kowloon Park, just 36 hours before the break-in is due, Louis hands me a device the size and shape of a matchbox. Sealed, black, and featureless, except for a single unlit LED.
One last party trick, he says. See if you can make the light come on.
What is it? I hide my irritation. My immediate response is that anything not directly concerned with tomorrow night is a waste of time. But I have to admit that everything he's suggested in the past has turned out to be helpful.
He shakes his head. I don't want to say. For every task you've attempted so far, you've known exactly what you were up against. Succeed with this, and you'll have proved to yourself that Succeed with this, and you'll have proved to yourself that even that knowledge isn't necessary. And you'll have proved that whatever BDI has in store, however difficult, however unexpected, you'll be able to defeat it.
I think this over, but in all honesty, it doesn't ring true. I don't need to prove that. I'm already convinced. I never had circuit diagrams for the dice generator, the locks, the cameras. Believe me, I rid myself of the telekinesis myth long ago. I know I've been choosing outcomes, not manipulating processes. It's all been black boxes to me. I don't need a literal one to drive home the point. I try to hand the thing back, but he won't accept it.
This is special, Nick. Longer odds than anything you've done so far. Roughly comparable to the entire BDI break-in. If you succeed, it'll mean you can be certain that such eigenstates are accessible.
I flip the box over on my outstretched palm. He's lying, but I can't think why. I say flatly, make up your mind. Which is it? The challenge of the unknown, or a test of sheer improbability?
Both.
He shrugs, then says, too affably by far,
But if you really want to know how it works.
I give him a look of pure disbelief, and he goes silent. Even with P5's help, it's hard to judge the weight of something so small. But there's certainly more in the box than, say, just a standard pinhead size. But there's certainly more in the box than, say, just a standard pinhead-sized microchip and a battery. Louis tries to look nonchalant as I toss the thing into the air. The way it spins suggests a roughly uniform distribution of density. No lumps, no empty spaces. What kind of electronics fills an entire matchbox? I say, what is it? Graphite you want turned into diamond? It's too light for lead into gold. I frown. Maybe I'll just have to cut it open and see. Louis says in, Louis says quietly,
There's no need for that. It's an optical supercomputer, taking random stabs at factoring a megadigit number. To do the job systematically would take about 10 to the 30th years. The chance of the machine succeeding in a few hours by pure good luck is proportionately infinitesimal. However, in your hands.
For a moment, I'm actually scandalized. Earnest, tormented Li Qiu Chung is pimping my talent, borrowed from Po Kwai, stolen from Laura, for filthy commercial gain. But my shock soon gives way to grudging admiration. Let a computer smear, with the right kind of quantum randomness, and you create, in effect, a parallel machine with an astronomical number of processors. Each one executes the same program, but applies it to different data. All you have to do is be sure that when you collapse the system, you choose the version that happened to find the needle in the mathematical haystack. And the world's first service to factor the huge numbers at the heart of, hitherto, de facto unbreakable codes is sure to rake in a fortune. At least until word spreads too widely that such a service exists, and people stop trusting the codes. I say, how do you know I won't just make the thing malfunction? If I can do it to locks, I can do it to computers. What if I choose some hardware failure so the light comes on for a wrong answer?
That can't be made literally impossible, but I've taken steps to minimize the relative probabilities. In any case, it's easy enough to check the answer, and if it's wrong, we can just try again.
I laugh. So, how much are you charging for this? Who's the client? Government or corporate?
He shakes his head primly. I have no idea. There's a third party, a broker, and they're discreet about their own identity, let alone.
Yeah, sure. But how much are you getting?
$1 million.
That's all?
There's considerable skepticism, understandably. Later, once the method is proven, we can raise the price.
I grin at him and toss the box high in the air. And what's my cut? 90% sounds fair. He's not amused.
The Canon has considerable expenses. The mod that lets you smear still hasn't been fully paid for.
Yeah? And once you have the eigenstate mod, you won't need my help at all, will you? So I'd better make good use of my bargaining position while it lasts. I was joking when I started the sentence, serious by the time I finished it. I say, is this what the true ensemble is for you? Selling code-breaking services to whoever's willing to pay? He doesn't reply, but he doesn't deny it. He just gives me that old look of deep spiritual agony. I ought to be angry. Angry that he planned to screw me, angrier still at this blasphemy. But the truth is, after all the pathological brain-fucked fanaticism that the loyalty mod has engendered in most of the canon, myself included, there's something almost refreshing about his simple opportunism. I ought to be outraged, but I'm not. If anything, I feel a pang of envy. It seems he's manipulated his chains into a form that makes them almost irrelevant. Unless he was some kind of saint beforehand, someone who never would have dreamed of profiting from the ensemble's work, his original personality may now be virtually restored. The corollary of all this envy and admiration is obvious, but false. Knowing what the loyalty mod is, I can't help being heartened to see that Louis is free of it. But that doesn't mean I want the same freedom for myself.
He says, I'll give you 30%.
60.
50.
Done. I don't give a shit about the money. It's a matter of pride. I want to make it clear to him that I, too, am almost human. Who else in the canon knows about this?
Nobody. Yet. I'd like to present it to them as a fait accompli. I'm sure they'd all acknowledge that we need to raise funds, but I'd rather not give them the chance to argue about the details.
Very wise. He nods wearily. He has the same intensity, the same air of guilt and confusion about him as always, but the whole meaning of it has changed. Half of it, no doubt, is pure affectation, and the rest, genuine exhaustion from maintaining so many layers of deception. I don't feel deceived, though. I don't feel cheated. The fact that I misread him so badly, for so long, only serves to make his unexpected sanity all the more welcome. I smear for 10 minutes before taking the device from my pocket, my standard precaution against the disconcerting effects of losing the delusion of free will. The LED is still unlit. I stare at it for a while, hopefully, but nothing happens. I'm puzzled by one thing. The probability of a malfunction causing the light to come on by now can't be literally zero. So why hasn't my smeared self seized upon a state in which that happens? Perhaps he's cautious enough to wait for the states containing a working computer and a right answer to begin to emerge, and, hopefully, drown out the false signal. I grow bored, then nervous, then bored again. I wish I could use P3. I ought to be able to mimic its effects, by choosing a state in which I happen to feel exactly as if I were primed. But my smeared self never seems to bother. I can't stop half expecting to be interrupted by a shout from Po Kwai, but thinking back on the times when I've woken her, there's always been a trigger, a strong emotion, a shock. Staring at a black box, waiting for a light to come on, just doesn't rate. And tomorrow? If I can manage to stay calm, perhaps I'll be safe. whatever manage to stay calm means when the mere fact that I might wake Po Kwai, increasing her influence on everything that happens, must be taken into account to determine whether or not I actually do. Trying to trace out a linear cause of a linear chain of cause and effect is futile. The most I can hope for is successful rationalization along the way, and a kind of static consistency in the pattern of events, looking back on them afterward. It's 4:17 when the LED finally glows, a steady, piercing blue. I hesitate before collapsing. The longest odds ever. So, how many versions of me die this time? But those qualms have been all but bred out of me. I still don't know what to believe, but each time I come through the supposed Holocaust unscathed, it grows ever harder to care. I tick the off switch, and someone survives. My memories are consistent. My past is unique. What more can I ask for? And if, a second ago, 10 to the 30-something living, breathing humans really were sitting here, wondering when the LED would finally come on for them, well, the end was quick and painless. In any case, Po Kwai is right. This is what it means to be human, slaughtering the people we might have been. Metaphor or reality, abstract quantum formalism, or flesh and blood, bleh, bull. In any case, Po Kwai is right. This is what it means to be human, slaughtering the people we might have been. Metaphor or reality, abstract quantum formalism, or flesh and blood truth, there's nothing I can do to change it. I cut through Zeno's lethargy and choose sleep with surprising ease. In the early afternoon, I deliver the computer to, of all places, the junk nanotech stall where I picked up Hypernova. More of Louis' bizarre notions of security. I swear to myself that, after tonight, I'm going to start sorting out that mess. The LED is still glowing when I hand the thing over, an encouraging sign. Apparently, the program loops endlessly once it finds the factors, repeatedly confirming the result. So, either I've caused some permanent corruption which is making the machine consistently lie, or the whole audacious scheme has worked. And an independent check on a second computer will soon settle the issue. Just what our skeptical clients will make of this impossible feat, I don't know. In their place, I'd suspect I was being set up for a torrent of disinformation. Maybe they'll decode great slabs of genuine data and assume that it's all designed to mislead them. I glance up at a patch of cloudless blue sky and laugh. Po Kwai is on a rest day, but that's no problem. I've used Ensemble successfully under these conditions 3 times before. The smeared Nick and dreaming Po Kwai has done. Oh gosh. Okay, so for some context on why I'm about to have some difficulty with this, and I'm going to have to repeat it like 4 times to get it right, is we have the smeared Nick and Dreaming Po Kwai, where Nick and Dreaming Po Kwai is all hyphenated, so Nick and Dreaming Po Kwai, and the dreaming is in parentheses, so it's the smeared Nick and Dreaming Po Kwai clearly has it down to a fine art now, the requisite skills preserved between incarnations in some corner of my skull, or in some we were doing so well. The smeared Nick and Dreaming Po Kwai clearly has it down to a fine art now, the requisite skills preserved between incarnations in some corner of my skull, or hers, or both. I sit in the anteroom, primed, but nonetheless infected with a sense of anticipation. Enough, at least, to keep me from sinking into a pure stakeout trance. I wonder idly, not for the first time, if in fact I could have stolen Ensemble straight from Po Kwai's skull by sheer brute choice of eigenstate, selecting the spontaneous rearrangement of my own neurons into a perfect copy of the mod. But I don't see how my smeared self could have discriminated between a successful result and all the alternatives. Useless neural rewirings possible. Whoa. Whoa, 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 whoa. I started reading a different sentence there, I think. My brain certainly shut off midway through that. That's scary. But I don't see how my smeared self could have discriminated between a successful result and all the alternative, useless neural rewirings possible. Any test of efficacy would have required me to collapse first. At dinner, Po Kwai seems morose. I ask her what's wrong. She shrugs. Nothing new. I'm just sick of being bullied and patronized and gagged. That's all. What's Lung done now? Oh, nobody's done anything. Nothing's changed. It just all seems even more stupid and oppressive than usual today. I read an article in Physical Review this morning, a whole new treatment of the measurement problem. They add a few more dimensions to space-time, throw in a few nonlinearities, asymmetries, and assorted fudge factors, and, miracle of miracles, the collapse of the wave falls out the other end. I know I should have dutifully silenced her halfway through the word measurement, if only for the sake of appearances, but the hypocrisy would have been too much. She says, people are wasting valuable time heading down paths that I know are blind alleys. That makes me a liar by default. I don't expect Lung to divulge any commercial secrets, like neural maps or details of the mod, but I don't see why we can't at least publish the results of the experiments. She makes a sound of pure frustration. I signed the secrecy provisions freely. I have no one to blame but myself. Of course, they wouldn't have hired me if I hadn't signed, so in a sense I had no choice. But that doesn't make me feel any better about it. I say blandly, I'm sure ASR will release everything in good time. How long has it been since your first result? 3 months? Newton didn't publish his work for years. Newton's work, she says bitterly, wasn't this important. I deprime, smear, wait. The familiar routine. I spend some time trying to calm myself, until I realize that what I'm feeling is more excitement than fear. It's an unfamiliar emotion. It's a long time since I confronted anything challenging, let alone dangerous, without using P3 to neutralize the experience. I feel a surge of pure resentment. The zombie Boy Scout has cheated me out of half my life, stolen it, and then gone through the motions like a sleepwalker, not even truly living it for me. But I quash this maudlin bullshit. The zombie Boy Scout has saved my life 1,000 times, and it was my choice to live that way. I never wanted excitement. I never wanted to be a mindless adrenaline junkie. I've been cheated out of nothing but an early death. And what danger am I confronting now? I know I can bypass any amount of security hardware. I've proved that I can choose eigenstates as improbable as everything that lies ahead. What is there left to fear? Only change. I stare out of the fake window at a cluster of dark towers shrouded in sparks of golden light and think, the city I have to cross tonight is no place I've ever known. In the real New Hong Kong, locked doors do not fall open, guards do not avert their gaze. I'll be walking out into a dream city where anything at all can happen. I laugh softly. Anything at all, yes. But out of that infinite diversity, I'll choose nothing but the smoothest, simplest burglary in history. Nothing but success, without complications or harm. Or change. Walking unseen through the 30th floor checkpoint is an easy start. If everything collapses now, all I've done is left my post for 30 seconds, to ask a colleague to take my place while I deal with an urgent bowel movement that my mods seem to be unable to delay. Not correct procedure, but nobody's going to shoot me for that. I glance at the guards. A young man and a middle-aged woman. They coyly look away. I wonder, do they feel manipulated? Or are they rationalizing their actions, convenient beyond belief for me, but not intrinsically all that bizarre, as easily as ever? If my smeared self chooses a state in which they're visibly inattentive, but leaves the hidden details of their mental processes to chance, then I expect the odds are Whoa. Then I expect the odds are that the state also includes an elegant justification. If the brain can pull off that trick so consistently for eigenstates chosen purely at random, then surely the bias that I'm introducing, skewing their actions but blind to their thoughts, shouldn't spoil the effect. Between the 12th and 11th floors, I hear a door below me fly open. I freeze, think of backtracking. But before I can move, a technician bounds up the stairs right past me, whistling tunelessly. I slump against the wall. A few seconds later, the door of the 30th floor slams shut. Did he see me? He was in a hurry. He would have ignored me regardless. So could my smeared self tell the states apart? Why didn't he keep the man out of the fucking stairwell altogether until I'd passed? Have I been collapsed or not? I take out the dice generator, flick it on. Snake's eyes. And again, and again, and again. I'm greatly relieved, but there's something perverse, something almost insane about this test. If I were collapsed, then, yes, the odds against this pattern would be overwhelming. But if I'm smeared, all patterns occur. So I'm decreasing the intrinsic probability of the eigenstate that constitutes success, putting more demands on my smeared self, and creating ever more versions of myself who know that they won't be chosen. And proving that I will survive the final collapse? Or at least someone who arises from me? A descendant? A son? Those are both in quotes. No, I'm not even doing that. I'm not even doing that. Every version who used the dice has smeared into versions who witnessed every possible outcome. If a billion versions consulted the dice, then a billion of the subsequent offspring will have seen four snake's eyes. I have no choice but to take it on faith that I'm the one who'll end up real. I continue. I'm linked to the technician now, and keeping him from collapsing Nick and Po Kwai and at least two guards. What about the other people on his shift? My mind balks, but I keep moving. Even if he hadn't come into the stairwell, whatever that means when we're not yet collapsed, would the mere fact that he might have done so been enough to correlate our wave functions? I'm linked to Po Kwai, aren't I? Without this version of me having observed her since I smeared. If this is getting to be a little much for your brain, trust me, this is really hard for me too, and this is not the first time I've read this book. This is like This is some of the strangest shit you're gonna read. You're gonna hear or read in a while. My brain is working overtime to even try to keep up. I leave the stairwell on the ground floor and cross the foyer, staring at all the guards, staring into thin air. I do all I can to notice whether or not I've been seen, making it easier for my smeared self to choose the correct state. Do all I can and making it easier, both being in quotes. So, so there. I don't know why I'm telling you that. The front doors slide open, and I step out onto the forecourt, set back from the street and largely concealed by a cluster of food stalls, all closed at this hour. I can hear people shouting and laughing nearby, and the whir of bicycles in the distance. But mercifully, there is nobody in sight as I move around the building to the laneway where the robot delivery van is parked. I glance back once, half expecting to find myself being pursued by a guard who snapped out of his trance a moment too soon. But that must be happening to someone, but not to me. There's plenty of slack in the timetable. It's only 1:07, and the van's not due to depart until 1:20. I climb into the back and sit in the dark. My presence or absence will have no effect on the vehicle's actions. Its route and schedule have been pre-programmed, so nobody observing its passage will be observing me, measuring me in or out. However, they will be collapsing the van itself, keeping it on a single, plausible, classical trajectory from here to BDI. And it's comforting to have that restraint imposed. I'm not sure what difference it makes in the end, but it's good to know that the vehicle won't be free to take every possible path across the city. Somehow, the thought of versions of me arriving at the wrong destination entirely seems worse than any other kind of fate. When the van starts to move, the effects are barely perceptible. Barely percept. The effects are barely. When the van starts to move, the effects are barely perceptible. The motor is silent, the acceleration gentle. Sitting on the cool metal, smelling the faint odor of plastic from some recent cargo, everything is disconcertingly mundane. I find I find myself at a loss to know how to pass the time. I don't want to dwell on the dangers ahead. There's nothing to be gained by contemplating the improbability of success. I can't go into stakeout mode, but I distract myself by concentrating on trying to judge the van's progress, without aid from P5, without even consulting the route marked out on Deja Vu's street map. The ride is smooth, but taking a corner is unmistakable, and I plot each turn-off on a vaguely imagined map, summoned from memory alone. I notice occasional, faint decelerations as the van avoids other traffic. Deviations from the predetermined schedule, yes, but still entirely independent of me. I was wrong. Outside the van, there's no dream city, just the same new Hong Kong as always. And inside? I can't help myself. I take out the dice generator and run it again. The machine is too smart for its own good. The holograms it creates are always scrupulously consistent with ambient light, and so in the darkness the dice are rendered realistically invisible. Another chance to decide not to throw the dice, and risk not being chosen? I use a flashlight to watch the snake eyes fall, and whatever the logic, the sight is powerfully reassuring. I shut the thing down after witnessing 6 tosses, having reduced my eigenstate's probability by a factor of about 2 billion. The van takes frequent, gentle turns as it moves through the clusters of branching streets toward BDI. I lose track of where I am. The pathological layout here is too complex to recall in detail, unaided. When the van finally halts, I wait 30 seconds to convince myself that it hasn't merely paused for some unforeseen obstruction. I climb out and find myself standing almost on the spot where I released Culex back in January. Memories of the night flood back with perfect clarity, but the process feels more like voyeurism than nostalgia. I have no right to stare so brazenly into the life of that dead stranger. It's 2:03. I have 57 minutes. I glance up at the gray sky, at the bubble weighing down on me, oppressive as a blanket of thunderclouds. From nowhere comes an irritable thought. I should have waited for Louis to pay me $500,000, and then decided if my commitment to the true ensemble really demanded this piece of lunacy. I could crawl back into the van. I don't, though, and any versions of me who did are as good as dead, and they surely know it. How do they feel about that? How do they rationalize that? I head for the fence. I climb over as I did before. The prospect of unnecessary miracles on open ground makes me uneasy, and my smeared self, as always, complies with my expectations. Or vice versa. I have no idea who's on duty tonight, but I picture Huang Qing and Li So-lung, preferably playing cards, not bothering to glance at the monitors. I still don't know at what point I sabotage this kind of operation. Oh, it's not operation, it's observation. No wonder. I knew I read something wrong there, but I couldn't tell what. I have no idea who's I have no idea who's on duty tonight, but I picture Huang Qing and Li So-lung, preferably playing cards, not bothering to glance at the monitors. I still don't know at what point I sabotage this kind of observation, in the camera's sensor chip, the cable, the display, or the retina or brain of the watcher. Whatever gets me by unnoticed, all I can choose is the outcome, and who knows what mechanism is most likely. I enter by the same window, But this time there's no need to cut it. But this time there's no need to cut. It slides open at my touch. I climb through and make my way slowly across the lab, hands outstretched, wishing I still had the wireframe map that guided me last time. I bump into a stool, then a bench, but I don't send any glassware crashing. Those of me that did might as well slit their wrists on the fragments. I move down the hallway and into the stairwell. The vault, according to Li Shuwai, is on the fourth floor, in the back of Chen Yaping's office. In fact, even after all this time, I think I can recall a blue no data region in the QLEX map in just that spot. Halfway up the stairs, doubt hits me like a blow to the chest. Po Kwai is 20 kilometers away. Blech. Po Kwai is 20 kilometers away, fast asleep. We're not linked. We're not smeared. She's not helping me choose reality. How could I have ever swallowed all that quantum mystical voodoo? It's bullshit. Louis set me up. It's as simple as that. The Canon is a trick to test my loyalty. He sabotaged my mods, planted a rigged dice generator in a stall near my home, conspired with Po Kwai and the guards here and at ASR. And the padlock? How could he have known that I'd try something as ridiculous as 10 nines first time? I'm not reading out 9 10 times. I'm sorry. Y'all's had enough with up, down, up, 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 down, up, 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 up. You had enough of that, myself included. So we're not reading out 10 nines, even though I just did the same number of syllables, at least saying another syllable entirely. Okay, so now we're doing it. And the padlock? How could he have known that I'd try something as ridiculous as 99999999999 first time? But if he's screwed around with my mods, there's no telling what else he's done inside my skull. For all I know, Hypernova might grant him absolute control over everything I do, everything I think. He could have made me guess the right combination. I lean against the wall, trying to decide which is the most insane. Believing in this pointless, farcical, massively implausible conspiracy. Excuse me, what's that? I lean against the wall, trying to decide which is the most insane. Believing in this pointless, farcical, massively implausible conspiracy, or seriously thinking that I can open locks by splitting into 10 billion people. I stare down into the darkness of the stairwell. And the true ensemble? The mystery I'm living for? Is that nothing but another lie? I know it's nothing but the loyalty mod, the way my brain's been wired, but I search my pockets for something coin-like, something Louis can't possibly have interfered with. The best I can do is the flashlight's spare button-shaped power cell. There's a plus sign engraved on one side and a minus sign on the other. I crouch on the landing, the flashlight beam making a wedge of brightness on the concrete. 5 plus signs, I whisper. That's all. The odds are 1 in 32. Not much of a miracle to ask for. Plus. Plus. I laugh. What did I expect? The true ensemble would never abandon me. Minus. A strange numbness spreads through me, but I toss the cell again, quickly, as if what follows might somehow undo the past, if only I act swiftly enough. Plus. Minus. I stare at the final verdict, and realize that it proves nothing. Everything I've been living for might still be either true or false. Either way, though, there's no point in going on. I bound up the last 2 flights of stairs, jubilant, invulnerable. If those 5 simple plus signs hadn't purged me of every last trace of doubt and paranoia, then nothing will. Do you see what he did there? Do you see? Do you see? If you don't have some goosebumps, give it a minute. Give it a minute.
Existential horror, thy name is Greg Egan. Okay, let's just repeat the last paragraph so that we're really clear on what just happened here. 5 plus signs, I whisper. That's all. The odds are 1 in 32. Not much of a miracle to ask for. Plus. Plus. I laugh. What did I expect? The true ensemble would never abandon me. Minus. A strange numbness spreads through me, but I toss the cell again, quickly, as if what follows might somehow undo the past, if only I act swiftly enough. Plus. Minus. I stare at the final verdict, and realize that it proves nothing. Everything I've been living for might still be either true or false. Either way, though, there's no point going on. I bound up the last 2 flights of stairs, jubilant, invulnerable. If those 5 simple plus signs haven't purged me of every last trace of doubt and paranoia, then nothing will. Once I'm in Chen's office, I switch on the flashlight, unsure why I didn't risk using it when crossing the lab on the ground floor, but confident now that there is no danger. But confident now that there is no danger. I could turn on every light in the building and scream at the top of my voice, and nobody would know I was here. What looks like a normal connecting door leads to a small room fronting the vault. Wow. What looks like a normal connecting door leads to a small room fronting the vault itself. An unimposing construction full of dull gray polymer composite. Harder to cut, abrade, melt, or burn than a meter or two of solid steel, but about 1,000 times lighter. The control panel has a thumb scanning window, a numeric keypad, and 3 slots for keys. I hesitate, half expecting to have to wait a while for the lock to smear sufficiently, but a green light on the panel shines almost at once. Of course, the thing has been smeared since long before I walked in. Every unobserved inanimate object does. Wow. Horrible time for something resembling a hiccup. Of course, the thing has been smeared since long before I walked in. Every unobserved inanimate object does so. All I've done is observed it without collapsing it, and hence smeared myself still further into different versions, a whole new lineage for each eigenstate of the lock, giving me the power to choose its state when I choose my own. I grasp the handle and tug it, far harder than I need to. With a soft click, the door flies open, almost hitting me in the face. I step around it and walk into the vault. 6 by 6 meters, and most of it empty space. I play the flashlight beam across the far wall. There's a rack of shelves going up to the ceiling. 8 shelves, each bearing 20 neat plastic ROM boxes, the kind that hold 200 chips. I move in closer. Most of the boxes are labeled with ranges of serial numbers 019200, 019399, and so on. The boxes on the lowest 2 shelves, and the rightmost 2 on the 3rd shelf, are unlabeled and empty, but the rest seem to be full. That makes a total of 23,600 chips. I take the dice generator from my pocket. Why shouldn't I make this easy on myself? And then change my mind and put it away. Will one of my sons survive, or one of their cousins who used the dice? Both are capable of success. I reach out quickly and grab a box. It has a simple, purely mechanical lock. Perhaps I could even make this slide open by pure choice, my first ever feat of truly macroscopic quantum tunneling. But I don't. I open it with a skeleton key, which takes almost a minute. I resist the temptation to close my eyes before lifting a chip from its cavity on the molded tray, and resist the temptation to put it back and choose again when I realize that I've taken one from the very edge of the tray. I plug the ROM into a reader with an IR transceiver, then I invoke RedNet and CipherClerk and talk to the reader. I say,
Show me the ID page, in English. The shadows of the vault fade to almost fade bleh. The shadows of the vault fade almost to blackness, and a window of vivid blue on white text rushes toward me from the center of my visual field. Ensemble, Neural Modification Algorithm. Copyright 2068, Biomedical Development International. Unauthorized reproduction of this software by any method in any media is a violation of the Intellectual Property Covenant of 2045 and is punishable under the laws of the Republic of New Hong Kong and other signatories to the covenant. Working by touch, I plug a blank chip into the reader's second port and say, "Copy everything, deleting all security, removing all encryption. Verify 1,000 times." A sentry icon appears in front of the window and says, "Password?" I close my eyes, to little effect, blank my mind, and hear my virtual larynx whisper something in Cantonese. It's not a word I've picked up, and I don't bother asking déjà vu for a translation. The sentry bows and vanishes, and a caricature of a medieval monk, copying a manuscript in comical fast motion, takes his place. I stand in the center of the vault, swaying gently. I have no way of knowing if I'm experiencing success, or just some combination of hardware, mod, and natural brain malfunctions which looks exactly like it. For isolated tasks, the odds look good. If I am inside a vault in the BDI building, then with a mere 23,600 chips to choose from, the number of states in which I really did pick the right one must surely swamp those in which the chip reader and or cipher clerk lied, and pretended that I had Ensemble when I really had something else. But as for the probability of hallucinating the whole night's work without even leaving ASR, compared to that of actually opening all those locked doors, I don't know. All I can be sure of is that after the collapse, it won't take long to tell the difference. Either I'll have a copy of Ensemble in my pocket, or not. Verifying the copy 1,000 times is pure overkill. If a mistake in the copying process is unlikely under normal conditions, and my smeared self does nothing to seek out such an event, then it should remain as improbable as ever. I'm still glad that I'm doing it, though. Part of me refuses to believe that I can force locks and cameras into wildly implausible failures, and then take it for granted that other equipment, equally vulnerable to quantum tunneling, will operate flawlessly. After a few minutes, the monk stops work, bows, and vanishes. I shut down CipherClerk, and then, with almost ridiculous deliberation, I unplug the ROM, pocket the reader, place the ROM back on the tray, lock the box, return it to the shelf. I play the flashlight beam across the wall, searching for anything I might have disturbed, but everything looks just the way I found it. I turn around. There's a woman in a nightdress standing in the doorway. Thin, mid-30s. Anglo features, skin as black as my own. Laura Andrews. But not as I saw her in the basement, disguised as Han Shu Lian. Laura Andrews, as in the Hilgeman's files, as in my client's transmission. How did she get out of the basement? Stupid question. But how did she do it tonight when she couldn't manage it before? Have I done something inadvertently to undermine the security systems monitoring her? But if she's finally succeeded in escaping, what's she doing up here? I reach for a can of tranquilizer, thinking, and why should my smeared self let her interrupt me? Does this prove that I won't be chosen? That I'm now as good as dead? She says, "You have what you came for?" I stare at her, then nod. "And what exactly do you plan to do with it?" "Who are you? Are you Laura? Are you real?" She laughs. "No, but your perceptions of me will be. I speak for Laura, or Laura and the smeared Nick and Po Kwai, and others. But mostly Laura." I don't understand. You speak for Laura? Are you Laura, or not? "Laura is smeared. She can't talk to you herself. She's talking with the smeared Nick and Po Kwai, but she's created me to talk to you." I
Her complexity is spread across eigenstates. The two of you could never interact directly, but she's concentrated enough information into a single state mode to communicate the essentials. She's made contact with the smeared Nick and Po Kwai, but they're childlike, unreliable, which is why I'm talking to you. I You've stolen Ensemble. Laura has no wish to prevent that, but she wants you to understand exactly what it can do. Still confused, I say defensively, I know what it can do. I'm here, aren't I? I opened this vault. I suppose I shouldn't be shocked to discover that the smeared Laura is not retarded. After all, she was smart enough to get out of the Hilgaman, and she's had 34 years of emergent probability to refine whatever brain pathways work best in that mode. But to find her able to manufacture apparitions to lecture me on the use of Ensemble is still something of a revelation. She shakes her head and says, You don't understand, but you will. Laura will amplify a state in which you do. She's manipulating me. She's communicating with you in the only way she can. Her effects, I promise, will be independent of those of the smeared Nick and Po Kwai. And, given your brain psychology, the most likely route to understanding is a conversation, like this one. Like this one? Meaning, of course, that there are other conversations, and maybe this won't be the one that succeeds. But that's been true of everything I've done tonight. Becoming squeamish now would be ludicrous. Go on. The spokesperson says, The first thing you must understand is that the extent of the collapse is finite. The human brain only has a certain degree of complexity, and a finite number of people with finite brains can't destroy an infinite number of states. What's more, there are states in which the brain pathways involved in the collapse have ceased to function. Without those pathways, the state is untouchable. The collapse is a local phenomenon. It depletes part of superspace, the space of all eigenstates, but only part. An infinite amount remains intact. A single branch of reality in the middle of a huge void, but beyond that void, an infinite thicket. It isn't exactly what I it isn't exactly what I suspected the first time Whoops. Isn't that exactly what I suspected the first time I smeared and collapsed? But how could we be surrounded by all of this and not detect it? To detect a state, you have to collapse it to really. Bleh. To detect a state, you have to collapse it to reality. How can you do that to a state which doesn't partake in the collapse? Then how do you know that these states exist? Laura knows. How? The uncollapsed parts of superspace aren't uninhabited. There's intelligent life spread across the Argon states. When one civilization discovered the depletion region you inhabit, they studied the borders, cautiously, and then took steps to seal off the region. By creating the bubble? Yes, but before the bubble was put into place, one individual decided to explore further, to enter the region itself. And Laura's seen this alien? It sought her out and made contact? Because she doesn't collapse the wave? The spokesperson smiles. No, Laura is the explorer. Or at least, the explorer shaped her to become the closest thing to itself that it could achieve. It crossed the depleted region and interacted with your reality. In doing so, it was collapsed, destroyed, but it arranged the collapsed in a way that coded part of its complexity into Laura's genes. When she's collapsed, Laura can barely function, because most of her brain is taken up with pathways that only work when she's smeared. But when she is smeared, she is, in effect, the explorer reborn. Laura is the avatar of a bubble maker? A distracting voice whispers, Believe it, or you're dead for sure. Why did she stay in the Hilgaman? Why has she stayed here? Surely she could escape. She has escaped. She's explored most of the planet. Most of the planet? But they caught her twice. Yes, they caught her near the Hilgaman, but not because she was trying to escape permanently. She never intended to be collapsed anywhere except in her room. But out of all the trips she made, those two went wrong. The Hilgaman was a safe, convenient base. She was left unobserved long enough to smear to a degree of complexity which enabled her to mount expeditions. From that point on, she could keep herself uncollapsed in the same way that you have.
So why go back to the Hilgeman at all? Why not stay unobserved forever, smeared forever? Smearing is an exponential process. Within a day or two, remaining unobserved would have required her to suppress the collapse of everyone on Earth. And after a day or two of that, she hesitates. What? The depleted region would be filled. Humanity would tunnel through the bubble and make contact with the rest of superspace. What would happen then is hard to predict, but one possibility is that the wave function in this region would never be collapsed again. I struggle to comprehend this. The whole world smeared permanently? How? When all the coexisting possibilities must include states that cause a collapse. But the only collapse that works is one that makes itself real. A world in which no collapse becomes real is just as consistent on those terms as one with a unique reality. So, Laura didn't stay smeared to avoid dragging us into this catastrophe? Exactly. And this is what you have to understand about Ensemble. Anyone who uses it can do the same. You mean I might? Anyone who smears for too long. The time scale is a matter of days. Laura has no wish to deprive you of the option of leaving the bubble, but nor does she wish to force this on you. Your own smeared selves may not show the same respect. My smeared self has always done My smeared self has always done exactly as I've wanted. Of course, you hold him hostage. This world is inimical to him. He relies on your cooperation. But each time you smear and collapse, as well as choosing outcomes that satisfy you, he is able to improve himself, selecting changes in your brain which make him more sophisticated, more complex. He's evolving, gaining strength. A chill passes through me. Then, will he even let me remember you saying that? Laura guarantees it. I shake my head. Laura says this, Laura says that. Why should I believe anything you've told me? Why should I even believe that you are what you say you are? She shrugs. You will believe, one way or another. There must be eigenstates in which you do. As for what I am, I'm a set of perceptions which happens to convince you. Nothing more, nothing less. I spray her with a tranquilizer. She smiles as the mist settles on her skin. Then she purses her lips and gently exhales. The cloud of tiny droplets reappears in front of her, then rushes toward me, shrinking, and, before I can put up a gloved hand to shield myself, flows back into the nozzle of the can. I sag to my knees. She vanishes. After a while, I climb to my feet and make my way out of the building. Ooh-wee. Halfway across the city, the van comes to a halt. The horn sounds, then someone shouts urgently, "Nick, come out! Something's happened!" I recognize Louis' voice. I hesitate, confused and angry. Has he gone mad? Is he trying to sabotage everything? If I stay in the van, maybe I can still return to ASR safely. But then it sinks in. He wouldn't be here without a good reason. I must already be collapsed. I clamber out. He's standing in front of the van with outstretched arms, blocking its way. A group of cyclists pass us, staring. I feel like I'm standing naked on the street. Observable again, vulnerable again to the same contingencies as everyone else. We're on the outskirts of the city center. I blink at the jeweled buildings looming ahead. It's hard to accept that I've been delivered back into the ordinary world, without a jolt, without a premonition. Louis says, "They know you're missing." How? Why couldn't I stop it? He shakes his head angrily. "I don't know why. Too many people involved. That isn't important. It's happened." What do you mean, too many people? "They found a bomb about 20 minutes ago." Oh, shit. The children. Po Kwai? She's fine. They defused it. Nobody's been hurt. But the building went on full alert. They swept every corner. You can imagine.
They found 3 other devices, and they found you missing. Maybe you just couldn't juggle all the possibilities, keeping the bombs undetected and unexploded. I don't know, but you have to leave the city.
What about you and the others?
I'm going to stay. The Canon will have to keep a low profile, but they still don't know we exist. I expect ASR will assume that the children got to you somehow. A puppet mod.
If the children had put a puppet mod in my skull, I would have stayed in the fucking building and made sure that the bombs went off.
He scowls impatiently. Okay, I don't know what ASR will think. It doesn't matter. You have to leave. The rest of the Canon aren't implicated. We can look after ourselves.
He steps away from the van. It speeds off into the darkness. Then he takes a card from his shirt pocket and hands it to me.
$500,000. Pure anonymous credit drawn on an orbiting account. Go to the harbor, not the airport. ASR will find it harder to pull strings there. And with this, I expect you can outbribe even them.
I shake my head. I can't go.
Don't be stupid. If you stay, you're dead. But with the Eigenstate mod, the Canon stands a chance of staying 1 step ahead. You did get it?
I nod. Yes, but you can't use the mod. The risk is too great.
What do you mean?
I recount my experience in the vault. He listens to the entire revelation with remarkable equanimity. Equanimity. Bleh. With remarkable equanimity. I wonder if he believes a word of it. When I'm finished, he says,
We'll be careful. We'll only use it for short periods. You've smeared for over 4 hours without any kind of trouble.
I stare at him. You're talking about gambling with... I can't find the right words. The planet? Humanity? Neither would exactly be lost, just embedded in something larger. But that's not the point.
You've proved that it's safe, Nick. An hour or 2 can do no harm. What do you want to do? Bury the data? Undiscover it? You can't. The sham ensemble still have their copies. Do you want them to keep their ascendancy? After all they've done to you? One way or another, every question the mod raises is going to be explored. I thought that was important to you.
I say automatically, of course it is. And then I realize that I don't mean it at all. I don't give a fuck about the mystery of the true ensemble. Stunned, I wait for the backlash, the denial. There's nothing but silence. The loyalty mod is gone. I've tunneled right out of its constraints. I close my eyes, expecting the world to come crashing down around me, expecting my purposeless soul to evaporate and diffuse into the air.
Nick?
I shake my head, open my eyes. Sorry, I was dizzy for a second. Some side effect of the collapse. I take off my gloves and reach into the pocket where the chip reader is, the copy of Ensemble still plugged in. Without removing the device from my pocket, I invoke RedNet and CipherClerk and start copying data into CipherClerk's buffers.
Louis says, We can't waste time arguing. Give me the data and get moving.
I told you the mod's too dangerous. So why am I copying it before erasing it? Do I really trust myself to use it wisely? To make a modest fortune breaking codes without imperiling life as we know it? The arrogance is breathtaking. But I don't stop the flow of data. Louis says quietly,
Phone a bank. Verify the card. $500,000. That's what we agreed on.
I don't care about the money. I almost hand the card back, but if I do it with my free left hand, he may wonder what I'm doing with my right hand. Louis looks away, sad and tortured as ever. I think making money from the mod is important to him, and people get nasty if you mess with their religion. I prime and reach for my gun. Left-handed, too late. I feel a targeting beam on my forehead and freeze. A moment later, 2 armed women emerge from the alleyway in front of us. Neither are aiming their weapons at my head. A third person, the source of the beam, must still be in the shadows, covering them. Louis says,
Put your hands on your head.
The copy is 90% done. I stall. I didn't expect this kind of... He grabs my arms and jerks them into place. The zombie Boy Scout observes helpfully. I should have done an erase with copy, wiping everything as it was transmitted. Louis takes my gun, searches me, and quickly finds the reader. As he takes it from my pocket, I broadcast an erase command, but the positioning is bad. Cipher Clerk gives me an error message from RedNet. Then a tutor icon appears in my head and starts delivering a lecture on troubleshooting infrared connections. I shut it down. Louis says, "The card is valid, $500,000. I haven't cheated you. Head for the docks and you'll be out of this mess by dawn." I say, "You don't believe me, do you? About Laura, the bubble makers, any of it?" He looks me in the eye and says softly, "Of course I believe you. I worked out most of it myself 6 months ago. Why do you think the sham ensemble were searching for the pattern of events that led them to Laura? They'd guessed the reason for the bubble, and they hoped the bubble makers might have given us a key, an example of what we had to become if we wanted to leave the prison they'd built around us." He steps aside, and one of his goons approaches. I wait, with a strong sense of deja vu, for a tranquilizing spray or a hypodermic in the neck. Instead, the woman draws a nightstick and swings it toward the side of my head. And with that, we go out with a, well, I would say bang, but it's more of a boonk. Uh, right to a noggin. Right to the noggin. And that is where we will leave it for today. Next week we'll be doing the final installment. It'll be the end, the finale of the book. So yeah, kind of a lot to process there. Kinda. Mm, quite a lot to process indeed. So yeah, we've got the heist because it's Heist O'Clock. We've got Laura is actually a bubble alien, is a bubble maker. Not in the blowing bubble sense, but in the they made the bubble around the solar system to keep us locked in. They know how we can break out of the bubble. They've given us the key to break out of the bubble. And oh, by the way, our character, our protagonist, who's had his loyalty mod just stopped working. So a lot happened. We've dealt with more existential horror, quantum existential horror, than I think most of us ever could conceive of in a lifetime in about 2 hours. So, congratulations. We're through the hard part. Things get really, really, really weird now. this is this is the beginning of weirdness. It will be weird o'clock next week. Um, so brace yourself for that. It's going to be fun. Oh yeah, it does not. The, the crazy train has left the station, and the brakes have, and we have converged on an eigenstate that does not have brakes on the crazy train. It will not stop. It is nutty. I realize that I could have read it a bit better a lot of the time. All I can do, I guess, is treat all of these as tasters, and you should really get the book or story itself and read it yourself. That'll probably make it more. That will allow it to make more sense. Hopefully, I'm getting some of it across and not mangling it. Any errors in the reading are, of course, my own, uh, as always. But yeah, with that, so yeah, next week will be the finale, and then I'll be reading the book has its own epilogue, and then there's a thing I'm going to treat as a postscript or epilogue, further epilogue, postscript. I'll treat as a postscript on Greg Egan's own website that kind of describes here are the concepts I was working with when I made this book, and here's what we know as of when I was making. Here's what we knew as of when I was writing it, and why this makes sense in its way given the constraints.
A copy of a copy of a copy of a it's beyond that. It's all the infinite possibilities that we could inhabit at any given time. So there is in fact a conceivable reality where that I could have converged on, another me has converged on, where I read that all without stuttering or having to take a single drink of water, and I had 10 billion people watching it, all in just soul-shattering awe. There's also a reality probably in which I am a demagogue leading the faithful on their way to true bliss, which is reading more books. But this is not that reality. I will take what I can get, and converge your eigenstates is all I can say, but carefully. So yeah, with that, I got a scooch. Hopefully, people are digging it. Thanks for tuning in, AE Optical Antenna. I do appreciate it. I do other streams throughout the week. Um, oh yeah, I haven't gotten. I meant to do that. I'll do that tomorrow. Um, I'll be getting the videos I've done in the last month or so organized into their proper playlists. I'm going at that point also to look to make sure I can get Axiomatic and Luminous in their own playlists if I haven't done that, because I honestly don't remember. And from there, yeah. I do other streams throughout the week. I have a Mecha Monday stream where I do something giant robot related or mecha adjacent. I have a Warframe Wednesday stream where I do something Warframey. And I have this Free Read Fridays where I read short stories and indeed entire novels aloud. Bleep bloop, I am a robot. I have that spiel memorized. It only took about 1,000 repetitions. Yay. So yeah, thanks again. Stay safe, stay sane, be decent to each other, and don't let the eigenstates bite you in the rear. I don't know how, but yeah, do that. Have you been modded? Do you know where your collapsed probabilities are? I don't. So yeah, this is about as out there as you're. I've commented on this before. How one of the reasons I love Greg Egan is he's like really out there in terms of his skiffy, his sci-fi stuff. Um, this makes him difficult to approach. Anybody staying with me on this ride is to be commended for at least their patience, if nothing else. Um, because it's this is a toughie. Like he Egan is tough. I've done his short stories before. They're tough. This is where doing his novels, that like is a whole nother can of worms. I do want to do more of his work. After next week, I am probably going to do at least one episode of short stories of some kind. Probably not Greg Egan short stories, but something from like Project Gutenberg or I don't know, Interzone or something, um, or Asimov's science fiction, something like that. Not from Asimov, but from like the pulp magazines or astounding science fiction, that sort of thing. And then after that, I'll probably be doing Hellburner by C.J. Cherry. After that, anything goes. Um, I have been jonesing to do either something by David Brin or something by Jeff Vandermeer, um, or maybe something by Larry Niven. I don't know. I've also kind of been jonesing to do something like like actual literature, like I don't know, The Sea Wolf by Jack London or something. I don't know. Um, infinite possibility. Infinite possibility. All right, I'm gonna go. Thanks again.